The year is 1206. For generations, the Mongol tribes of Northeast Asia have existed as fractured, warring entities, nomadic horsemen, skilled warriors, but perpetually divided by clan loyalties and petty grievances. This instability has defined their existence for centuries. But today, something profound shifts. Temüjin, a man forged in hardship and loss, unites these disparate groups under a single banner. He takes the title Genghis Khan, universal ruler, marking not just a political victory, but the genesis of an unprecedented imperial ambition. Temüjin's rise was not without immense struggle. Orphaned young and forced into exile, he endured years of betrayal, captivity, and relentless warfare. These experiences shaped his character, a ruthless pragmatism tempered by an unwavering loyalty to those who earned his trust. His military reforms were equally vital, abolishing tribal privileges, promoting based on merit alone, and creating a highly disciplined cavalry force, unlike anything seen before. The Mongol military machine wasn't just about individual bravery. It was about sophisticated logistics. Their horses were not merely mounts, but essential components of their war effort, capable of covering vast distances, carrying supplies, and even providing milk for sustenance. This Pony Express system allowed them to campaign far from their traditional territories, sustaining armies in the field for extended periods, a significant advantage over settled agricultural societies. The first major target for Genghis Khan's unified forces was the Jin Dynasty in northern China. The Jin possessed a larger, more established army, but were hampered by internal corruption and rigid social structures. Mongol tactics, feigned retreats, ambushes, a world where the goal wasn't to look healthy, and relentless pressure proved devastatingly effective against their conventional warfare strategies. The Siege of Zhengdu, a modern Beijing, marked a turning point, demonstrating the Mongols' capacity for rapid conquest. The Mongol conquest wasn't solely about military might. It was also underpinned by psychological warfare. Stories, often exaggerated and tethered and terrifying, were spread ahead of their armies to demoralize opposition and encourage surrender. Cities that resisted faced brutal consequences, serving as a stark warning to others. While undeniably cruel, this policy often minimized bloodshed, in the long run, facilitating quicker conquests. Following the Jin Dynasty, the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia became the next target. This vast territory stretched from modern-day Iran to Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. The Shah Muhammad II's arrogance and his order to execute Mongol emissaries triggered a devastating invasion. Cities like Bukhara and Samarkand were reduced to ruins as the Mongol army systematically dismantled the empire, further expanding their reach westward. The speed of the Mongol advance astonished contemporaries. Their armies moved with unparalleled efficiency, covering distances that would have been unthinkable for other empires of the time. This rapid expansion was facilitated by a network of relay stations, a yem, similar to the Roman cursus publicus. These stations provided fresh horses and supplies, allowing messengers and riders to travel at incredible speeds across vast territories. Genghis Khan's legal code, the Vyasa, was more than just a set of laws. It was a framework for governing his burgeoning empire. It emphasized loyalty, discipline, and religious tolerance, unusual policies for the time. While harsh by modern standards, the Yasa helped maintain order within the diverse populations under Mongol rule and fostered trade across their vast domains. Despite their military successes, Genghis Khan's reign was not without internal challenges. Maintaining control over such a vast territory required constant vigilance and firm leadership. Succession disputes arose even during his lifetime, foreshadowing the eventual fragmentation of the empire after his death in 1227. The question of who would inherit his legacy became a source of considerable tension. Despite its eventual fragmentation, the Mongol Empire's legacy endures. Its impact on trade, cultural exchange, military tactics, and political structures reverberates through history. The interconnectedness fostered by the Pax Mongolica irrevocably shaped Eurasia's landscape, leaving an indelible mark on the development of civilizations from Europe to East Asia. Examining its rise and fall provides invaluable insights into the complexities of empire building and the profound consequences of cross-cultural interaction. The death of Genghis Khan in 1241 plunged the Mongol Empire into a succession crisis, while his designated heir, Goryuk, ascended to the throne. The process was far from smooth. Powerful factions, led by Batu Khan and Gyuk's widow, Ogul Kamish, fiercely contested the selection. This period of instability saw infighting amongst the princes, diverting attention from ongoing campaigns in Europe and threatening the fragile unity Genghis Khan had forged. The traditional Kurultai process was manipulated, highlighting the growing power struggles within the ruling elite. Gyuk's reign proved to be short and unpopular. His attempts to reassert Mongol dominance over the Golden Horde, led by Batu, sparked open rebellion. Gyuk's rigid adherence to Mongol tradition and his perceived disrespect for Batu's established authority created deep resentment amongst many key commanders. The campaign against the Cumans and Poland, Hungary was abandoned as Mongol armies turned inward, engaging in costly skirmishes against each other. This internal conflict severely hampered expansionist ambitions. The assassination of Genghis in 1248 ended his turbulent rule, once again throwing the empire into disarray. A world where the perpetrators remain debated, suspected to be Ogul Kamish and her allies. The event underscores the brutal nature of Mongol politics. With no clear successor immediately available, another Kurultai was convened, further delaying crucial decisions regarding military campaigns and administrative reforms. The power vacuum created a period of fragile peace, maintained only by shifting alliances. Manmink Khan emerged from the chaotic succession struggle in 1251, becoming the Great Khan. His election was largely brokered by Batu Khan and represented a compromise between competing factions. Minqi's reign marked a return to a more centralized authority, although he faced continued challenges from those who felt sidelined during his ascension. He prioritized administrative reforms, attempting to standardize taxation and improve communication across the vast empire. Minqi initiated significant reforms to the Mongol postal system, the Yam. This greatly improved communication across the empire, allowing for faster dissemination of information and orders. The Yam relied on a network of relay stations with fresh horses, enabling riders to cover incredible distances at remarkable speeds. This innovation proved crucial in coordinating military campaigns and maintaining administrative control over such a geographically dispersed territory. During Wenqi's reign, Hulagu Khan continued his conquests westwards, reaching as far as Syria. The siege and capture of Baghdad in 1258 was particularly devastating, marking the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. However, news of Menqi's death during a campaign against the Tanguts in 1259 dramatically altered Hulagu's plans, forcing him to abruptly halt his advance and return eastwards. Minqi's death triggered another succession crisis, this time between his brothers Kublai and Arik-Bu-Ki. Kublai was initially declared Great Khan, but Arik-Bu-Ki, leveraging support from traditionalist Mongol factions, challenged his authority. This civil war pitted different regions of the empire against each other, straining resources and undermining Minqi's carefully established reforms. The conflict revealed deep ideological divisions within the ruling family. Kublai Khan's victory over Arik-Bu-Ki in 1264 solidified his position as Great Khan, though his authority remained contested by some Mongol leaders. He chose to focus on consolidating power within the Mongolian heartland and expanding into China rather than pursuing further westward expansion. This decision reflected a strategic shift towards focusing on settling conquered territories and developing more sustainable economic foundations. The Mongol Civil War had profound consequences for the Golden Horde. Batu's death in 1263 and subsequent power struggles weakened its authority, leading to fragmentation amongst its constituent khanates. The rise of the Nogai Khanate further destabilized the region, creating a complex web of shifting alliances and conflicts that would shape the future of Eastern Europe. These internal divisions ultimately curtailed Mongol influence beyond the steppe. The death of Genghis Khan marked not an end, but a transition. His vast empire was divided among his sons and grandsons, each carving out their own khanates. The Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Yuan Dynasty. While these successor states would continue to expand Mongol influence for centuries, the unified empire forged by Temüjin began its slow but inevitable process of fragmentation, setting the stage for a new era in Eurasian history. Despite periods of internal strife and strategic shifts in focus, the Mongol Empire continued to exert significant influence throughout the 13th century. The vast network of trade routes, the Pax Mongolica, facilitated unprecedented levels of cultural exchange and economic prosperity across Eurasia. However, the seeds of its eventual decline were sown during these succession crises, as power struggles eroded unity and fractured the empire into increasingly independent realms. The Mongol military machine was not solely about brute force. Genghis Khan implemented a sophisticated system of logistics, ensuring his armies were consistently supplied across vast distances. A network of yam stations, relay posts with fresh horses and provisions allowed messengers to travel at incredible speeds, transmitting orders and intelligence. This efficient infrastructure gave the Mongols an unparalleled advantage in communication and maneuverability, enabling them to sustain campaigns far longer than their adversaries could. Mongol siege warfare was remarkably innovative for its time. While they often employed traditional methods like catapults and battering rams, their true genius lay in adapting technology from conquered peoples. They readily adopted Chinese trebuchets, renowned for their power and accuracy, and incorporated Arab engineers into their ranks to improve fortifications and tunnel beneath city walls. This willingness to learn and integrate enemy expertise proved crucial in overcoming heavily defended urban centers. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, began to take shape in the mid-13th century. While initially characterized by brutal conquest, the Mongols recognized the importance of stability for long-term control and economic prosperity. They implemented standardized weights and measures, encouraged trade along the Silk Road, and offered religious tolerance, albeit within a framework of Mongol dominance. This era fostered unprecedented cultural exchange between East and West. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol rule. Previously dangerous and fragmented, it became significantly safer due to Mongol enforcement of law and order. Merchants could now travel relatively freely across vast distances, facilitating the movement not only of goods, but also of ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. This interconnectedness profoundly impacted societies from Europe to China. Religious tolerance was not merely a pragmatic political strategy for the Mongols. Many Mongol rulers, including Genghis Khan himself, held syncretic beliefs, blending shamanism with elements of Buddhism and Christianity. While they demanded loyalty and recognition of their authority, they generally allowed conquered populations to practice their own faiths without persecution, fostering a degree of stability in diverse territories. The transmission of gunpowder technology from China to Europe via the Silk Road is a direct consequence of the Pax Mongolica. The Mongols themselves utilized gunpowder weapons extensively, and their interactions with European powers introduced these devastating new technologies to the West, fundamentally altering warfare and contributing to significant social and political shifts. Ogdai Khan, Genghis Khan's third son, succeeded him as Great Khan. He continued his father's expansionist policies, overseeing campaigns in Russia and Eastern Europe that left a lasting impact on those regions. Ugadi was also responsible for establishing Karakoram as the Mongol capital, solidifying the empire's administrative center. The Mongol legal code, known as the Yasa, was initially unwritten but later codified. It covered a wide range of topics, including military organization, trade regulations, and criminal justice. Though often harsh by modern standards, the Yasa aimed to establish order and fairness within the vast empire, reflecting Genghis Khan's vision for a unified Mongol society. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol Empire stretched from Eastern Europe to East Asia, encompassing a significant portion of the world's population and economy. This unprecedented scale presented enormous challenges in governance and communication, ultimately contributing to internal divisions and weakening the empire's cohesion. By 1216, Genghis Khan's forces had systematically dismantled the Jin Dynasty, controlling much of northern China. The victory wasn't solely due to Mongol military prowess. Chinese engineers and siege specialists were integrated into the army, significantly enhancing their capabilities. This assimilation of talent became a recurring pattern throughout the empire's expansion, recognizing and leveraging expertise from conquered peoples. The Jin's fall opened up lucrative trade routes across Asia, bringing immense wealth and resources directly to the Mongol war machine. While the Mongol Empire's territorial unity would eventually dissolve into several successor khanates, its legacy remains profound. It facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange, transformed warfare, and reshaped the political landscape of Eurasia for centuries to come. The Mongols' impact on world history is undeniable, a testament to their military prowess, administrative innovation, and enduring influence. By 1248, Batu Khan's Golden Horde had carved a vast swath across Eastern Europe. Their relentless advance had shattered Polish and Hungarian forces at the Battle of Liegnitz, leaving devastation in their wake. But the Mongol war machine was beginning to show signs of strain. The deaths of Genghis Khan and subsequent succession crisis forced Batu back towards Mongolia for the Kurultai, the Great Assembly, to elect a new Great Khan. This abrupt halt marked a turning point. The westward expansion would temporarily cease, allowing Europe a brief respite. The election of Genghis Khan proved tumultuous. His claim was contested by several powerful figures, plunging the empire into civil war. Batu, a vassal but a significant power himself, opposed Genghis' rule and refused to acknowledge him fully. This internal conflict exposed vulnerabilities within the seemingly monolithic Mongol state. The system of succession, while designed for efficiency, consistently created opportunities for ambitious rivals to seize power through force or manipulation. Genghis' reign was short-lived. He died unexpectedly in 1248, possibly from illness or assassination. The ensuing chaos further fragmented the empire. Batu's refusal to acknowledge Gyaik's successors deepened the divisions between the western and eastern realms. While Mongol military dominance remained unchallenged on the battlefield, the empire's political cohesion was demonstrably weakening. This period marked a critical transition, moving away from centralized control towards more regional autonomy. Mongol administration across conquered territories varied considerably. In some regions, like Persia, Ilkhanate, Mongol rulers adopted aspects of local culture and governing practices, facilitating trade and fostering a degree of cultural exchange. Elsewhere, direct rule remained harsh and exploitative, with heavy taxation and strict enforcement of laws. The impact on the indigenous populations was complex. While devastation occurred initially, opportunities for some arose through service to the Mongol administration. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, was not simply an absence of warfare. It represented a period of relative stability across Eurasia, facilitating unprecedented levels of trade and cultural exchange. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, connecting east and west in ways never before seen. This interconnectedness led to the dissemination of technologies, ideas, and even diseases, fundamentally reshaping societies from China to Europe. The transmission of gunpowder technology from China to Europe during this period was particularly significant. While rudimentary forms existed previously, the Mongols' widespread use and adaptation of siege weaponry dramatically accelerated its development in the West. This technological transfer would eventually revolutionize warfare, diminishing the effectiveness of traditional castles and knightly orders, profoundly impacting European military history. The Black Death, devastating Europe in the mid-14th century, is now believed by many historians to have spread along Mongol trade routes, carried by fleas on rodents, within cargo ships and caravans. The plague rapidly decimated populations across Eurasia. The pandemic's impact was catastrophic, leading to social upheaval, economic collapse, and a profound questioning of religious beliefs. Despite the Pax Mongolica's benefits, resentment simmered beneath the surface in many conquered territories. Religious differences, cultural clashes, and heavy taxation fueled rebellions and resistance movements. These uprisings, though often brutally suppressed, demonstrated a persistent desire for self-determination among subjugated populations, foreshadowing the empire's eventual fragmentation. The death of Genghis Khan in 1259 triggered another succession crisis that proved even more destructive than the previous one. His brothers, Kublai and Hulagu, both vying for supreme authority, effectively divided the empire into distinct regional entities: the Ilkhanate, Yuan Dynasty, Chagatai Khanate, and Golden Horde, each pursuing independent agendas. This marked a definitive end to any prospect of unified Mongol dominion. The Khwarezmian Empire, encompassing Persia and Central Asia, proved a far more challenging adversary. Sultan Muhammad's arrogance and rash decisions precipitated war. His initial rejection of Genghis Khan's diplomatic envoys, followed by the execution of Mongol traders, served as direct provocations. This act of blatant disrespect ignited a conflict that would devastate one of the wealthiest empires in the world. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual dissolution. While each successor khanate continued to exert influence within its respective sphere, the era of unified Mongol conquest was over. The empire's legacy in trade, technology transfer, and political restructuring would profoundly shape Eurasia for centuries to come, leaving an indelible mark on world history. The Mongol military machine's logistical prowess was as crucial to its success as its warriors' ferocity. The Ortog, a sophisticated system of relay stations, ensured a constant flow of supplies, food, fodder for horses, and vital communication across vast distances. These stations were strategically located every 20-30 miles, allowing riders to exchange messages and provisions without delay. This network, far surpassing anything contemporary empires possessed, enabled rapid deployment and sustained campaigns over immense territories. Genghis Khan understood that maintaining control required more than just military dominance. He implemented a codified legal system known as the yasa, which covered everything from criminal justice and trade to family law and religious tolerance. While harsh by modern standards, the yasa promoted stability within the empire, minimized internal conflict, and fostered a sense of shared identity among diverse populations incorporated into the Mongol realm. Religious tolerance was a surprisingly defining characteristic of Mongol rule. While Genghis Khan himself adhered to traditional Mongol shamanism, he actively protected various faiths, including Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Taoism. This policy stemmed from pragmatic considerations, avoiding religious uprisings, but also reflected a genuine respect for diverse beliefs, which contributed significantly to the empire's administrative efficiency. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, emerged as the empire consolidated its power. This period witnessed unprecedented trade and cultural exchange between East and West. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, facilitating the movement of goods, technologies, and ideas across Eurasia. Venetian merchants like Marco Polo traveled extensively within the empire, leaving detailed accounts that captivated Europe. Technological diffusion accelerated during the Pax Mongolica. Chinese innovations like gunpowder, the compass, and printing technology spread westward, influencing European military advancements and contributing to the Renaissance. Simultaneously, knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine from the Islamic world reached China, enriching its intellectual landscape. The Mongol Empire's vastness presented significant challenges in communication and administration. To address this They utilized Uyghur script as their official written language for administrative purposes, allowing diverse peoples to communicate effectively across different linguistic backgrounds. This facilitated governance and ensured the smooth flow of information throughout the sprawling empire. Despite its relative tolerance, the Mongol Empire was not without its brutal episodes. The destruction of Khwarezmia, for example, remains one of history's most devastating sieges and massacres. While Genghis Khan often sought submission rather than annihilation, resistance frequently triggered ruthless reprisals that left lasting scars on conquered populations. The death of Ojadai Khan in 1241 triggered a succession crisis that temporarily fractured the empire. Temüjin Khatun, Ojadai's widow, attempted to seize power, but was ultimately defeated by Goyuk Khan. This internal struggle highlighted the inherent instability of empires built on personal loyalty and the constant maneuvering for dominance among Mongol princes. The division of the empire into 4 separate khanates, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Yuan dynasty, formalized a long-term fragmentation. While these entities maintained cultural and political links initially, they gradually developed distinct identities and pursued divergent agendas, reflecting the vastness of their territories and the evolving geopolitical landscape. The invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire was brutal and swift. Mongol tactics, feigned retreats, combined arms, assaults utilizing cavalry archers, and siege engines were overwhelming. Cities like Bukhara and Samarkand, renowned centers of learning and commerce, fell after fierce resistance, often followed by widespread destruction as a warning to other potential rebels. The legacy of the Mongol Empire is complex and multifaceted. While often remembered for its conquests and destruction, it also facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange, spurred technological innovation, and fostered a period of relative peace across Eurasia. Its impact reverberates through history, shaping trade routes, political boundaries, and even influencing the course of European development. By 1259, the Ilkhanate under Hulagu Khan had conquered Baghdad, shattering the Abbasid Caliphate and sending shockwaves across the Islamic world. The destruction was immense. Libraries burned, canals destroyed, and countless lives lost. While often portrayed as purely destructive, Hulagu's actions also facilitated a period of Mongol administration, albeit one built on fear and tribute. Mamluk Egypt, observing this devastation, recognized the existential threat posed by the expanding Mongol dominion and prepared for war. The Mamluk Sultanate, a military dynasty ruling Egypt and Syria, proved to be the first major power to decisively defeat the Mongols. At the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, the Mamluks, led by Sultan Qutuz and his general Baybars, inflicted a crushing defeat on Hulagu's forces under Kitbuka. This victory halted Mongol expansion westwards, preventing them from potentially conquering Egypt and further destabilizing the Levant. The significance of Ain Jalut extends beyond simply halting westward expansion. It demonstrated that the Mongols, while formidable warriors, were not invincible. This realization emboldened other regions and sparked resistance movements across Persia and Central Asia. The Mamluk victory also solidified their position as a major power in the region, preserving Islamic scholarship and culture from further Mongol destruction. Despite setbacks like Ain Jalut, the Golden Horde continued its expansion into Eastern Europe. Raids on Russia became increasingly frequent and devastating, culminating in the sack of Ryazan in 1237 and numerous other cities throughout the region. The fragmented Russian principalities were ill-equipped to resist the Mongol onslaught, leading to widespread destruction and a period of Mongol dominance known as the Tatar yoke. The Tatar yoke wasn't direct rule everywhere. The Mongols often preferred to extract tribute and exert influence through local rulers, allowing them to maintain power with a smaller military presence. This system fostered resentment among the Russian population, but also led to some cultural exchange, particularly in areas like administration and military technology. The isolation of Russia during this period profoundly shaped its subsequent history. The death of Menonmink Khan in 1259 triggered a succession crisis within the Mongol Empire, dividing it into competing factions. Kublai Khan, supported by his Argon brother, vied for power against another candidate, Kaidu. This internal conflict significantly weakened the empire's unity and paved the way for its eventual fragmentation into separate khanates. Kublai Khan eventually secured his position as Great Khan, but focused primarily on consolidating his rule in China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. His ambitions extended beyond merely ruling a dynasty. He sought to create a legitimate imperial order blending Mongol traditions with Chinese governance, adopting Confucian principles and patronizing Buddhist monasteries. While Kublai's Yuan dynasty flourished, other khanates faced different challenges. The Ilkhanate in Persia struggled with internal rebellions and devastating plagues, including the Black Death, which decimated populations across Asia and Europe in the mid-14th century. This pandemic significantly weakened Mongol power and contributed to its decline. The Golden Horde, initially powerful, gradually fragmented into smaller khanates like Kazan, Astrakhan, and Crimea. These successor states continued to exert influence in Russia and the surrounding regions for centuries, often engaging in conflict with both each other and their neighbors. The legacy of the Mongol invasion was woven deeply into the fabric of Eastern European history. Jochi, Genghis Khan's eldest son, led a significant portion of the Mongol forces into Eastern Europe. His campaigns targeted the Cumans and Rus principalities, loosely organized territories, perpetually engaged in internal conflict. The Mongols exploited these divisions, often forging alliances with disgruntled factions to further their objectives. Their reputation for ruthlessness preceded them, causing widespread panic and disarray. By the 15th century, the Mongol Empire was a shadow of its former self. Internal divisions, plagues, and rising regional powers had eroded its strength. While individual khanates persisted for centuries, the unified empire, forged by Genghis Khan, had dissolved, leaving behind a complex legacy of conquest, cultural exchange, and lasting impact on Eurasia's political landscape. The Ilkhanate's early rulers, like Hulagu Khan, faced persistent challenges from the Golden Horde to their northwest. The Mongol Civil War of 1260-2064 significantly weakened both realms, but ultimately solidified the division between them. Berk Khan, ruling the Golden Horde, actively supported his nephew Abubakar against Hulagu, leading to devastating raids and border skirmishes that disrupted trade routes and destabilized the region. This prolonged conflict exemplifies the internal fractures within the once unified Mongol Empire. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt proved to be an unusually resilient adversary for the Ilkhanate. Their superior cavalry tactics and fortified cities repeatedly thwarted Mongol ambitions in Syria and Palestine. The Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, where Baybars decisively defeated Hulagu's forces, marked a turning point, halting Mongol expansion westward and cementing Mamluk dominance in the region. This defeat was a monumental shock to the Mongol world. Ghazan Khan ascended to the Ilkhanate throne in 1295, inheriting a fractured empire embroiled in internal strife and external conflict. Recognizing the need for stability and economic recovery, he initiated significant reforms. Most notably, Ghazan embraced Islam, a controversial decision that alienated some Mongol Buddhists, but opened avenues for reconciliation with Islamic rulers and facilitated trade along safer routes. Ghazan's conversion to Islam had profound consequences for the Ilkhanate's relationship with neighboring states. He forged alliances with the Mamluks, leading to a joint campaign against the Golden Horde in 1300. While ultimately unsuccessful, this collaboration demonstrated a newfound unity among former adversaries and significantly weakened the Mongol presence further north, diminishing their raiding capabilities. Despite Ghazan's efforts, internal divisions persisted within the Ilkhanate. His successor, Olgitu, reverted to Buddhism, undoing much of his predecessor's progress and sparking renewed conflict with Islamic rulers. This religious oscillation underscored the fragility of the Ilkhanate's political stability and highlighted the ongoing struggle between Mongol tradition and assimilation into local cultures. The Chagatai Khanate, encompassing much of Central Asia, remained largely independent from the other Khanates. While initially united under Gidi's descendants, it fractured into two distinct entities, the White Horde and the Blue Horde. Constant warfare between these factions further destabilized the region, hindering trade and contributing to widespread poverty. The harsh desert environment only exacerbated their struggles. The Yuan dynasty in China, under Kublai Khan's successors, experienced a gradual decline marked by increasing corruption and peasant unrest. The Tangut Rebellion of 1368 severely weakened the dynasty's military strength and exposed its vulnerability. While initially benefiting from Mongol rule, the Han Chinese population grew increasingly resentful of foreign domination and heavy taxation. The Red Turban Rebellion, fueled by famine, economic hardship, and anti-Mongol sentiment, erupted in China during the early 14th century. Led by Zhu Yuanzhang, a former peasant and Buddhist monk, the rebels gained significant momentum, attracting widespread support from disaffected populations. Their relentless attacks gradually eroded Yuan dynasty control over key territories. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang's forces captured Dadus, modern-day Beijing, the capital of the Yuan dynasty. The last Mongol emperor, Togon Timur, fled north to Shangdu, marking the official end of Yuan rule in China. This pivotal event ushered in a new era under the Ming dynasty, signaling a complete shift in power and profoundly impacting East Asia's geopolitical landscape. The Battle of the Khalkha River in 1223 marked the Mongols' first major encounter with European forces. A coalition of Kievan Rus, Cumans, and Alans were decisively defeated, despite numerical superiority. Mongol cavalry tactics proved devastatingly effective against the disorganized and poorly coordinated enemy. This victory demonstrated the vulnerability of Eastern Europe and paved the way for future incursions. While the Yuan dynasty's collapse marked a significant turning point, the other khanates persisted for varying lengths of time. The Ilkhanate fragmented into smaller successor states by the mid-14th century, and the Chagatai Khanate continued to exist in diminished form. Though its political dominance waned, the Mongol legacy, including trade networks, cultural exchange, and military innovation, left an indelible mark on Eurasia. The Mongol military machine wasn't solely about cavalry charges. Siege warfare proved critical in conquering fortified cities, like Kaifeng, the capital of the Jin Dynasty. Mongol engineers employed innovative tactics, catapulting diseased corpses over walls to spread plague and utilizing captured Chinese siege weaponry, including trebuchets and gunpowder rockets. These methods, while brutal, demonstrated a willingness to adapt and learn from conquered peoples, significantly accelerating their conquest of northern China. The Jin dynasty's collapse in 1234 marked a pivotal moment. It not only eliminated a major rival, but also facilitated an alliance with the southern Song dynasty's enemies, the Khitans and the Tanguts. These alliances, forged through strategic diplomacy and promises of land and power, further expanded Mongol territory and provided crucial intelligence about Song defenses. The complex web of allegiances demonstrated Genghis Khan's understanding of political leverage beyond military might. Ogedai Khan, succeeding Genghis, continued expansion into Europe. His campaigns targeted Poland and Hungary in 1241, inflicting devastating losses on both kingdoms. The Mongol tactics, feigned retreats, encirclement maneuvers, and relentless archery overwhelmed European armies, accustomed to more rigid formations. While Udi ultimately recalled his forces to attend Genghis's funeral, the raids instilled a profound fear throughout Europe, leaving a lasting legacy of terror. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, emerged as a surprising consequence of conquest. While initially characterized by destruction, the Mongols recognized the need for stability to facilitate trade and resource extraction. They standardized weights and measures, implemented a unified script based on Iga, and ensured safe passage for merchants along the Silk Road. This fostered unprecedented levels of cultural exchange between East and West. The Yam system was instrumental in maintaining communication and control across the vast empire. This relay network utilized mounted messengers who traveled predetermined routes, exchanging horses at designated stations. Messages could travel incredible distances. Some estimates suggest up to 90 miles per day, allowing for rapid dissemination of orders and information from the Great Khan to distant provinces. Religious tolerance was another defining feature of Mongol rule, driven largely by pragmatic considerations. They understood that forcing conversion would breed resentment and rebellion. Consequently, Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and practitioners of traditional religions were generally permitted to practice their faiths freely, often receiving patronage from Mongol rulers, seeking legitimacy and skilled advisors. Kublai Khan's reign marked a shift towards settled governance and Chinese cultural assimilation. He embraced Buddhism and actively promoted Confucianism, attempting to legitimize his rule in the eyes of the Han Chinese population. His construction of Xanadu, a magnificent palace complex intended to rival those of China's imperial past, exemplified this ambition, but also highlighted people with the challenges of governing a conquered people with vastly different customs. The Mongol navy's emergence was crucial for conquering the southern Song dynasty. Initially reliant on captured ships, they quickly learned naval warfare techniques from Korean shipbuilders and developed a formidable fleet capable of challenging Song maritime power. This allowed them to blockade coastal cities, disrupt trade routes, and ultimately pave the way for the final conquest of China in 1279. Despite their vast empire and military prowess, internal divisions began to surface. Succession disputes, regional power struggles among khanates, and resentment from conquered populations ultimately contributed to the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. The very system that facilitated its rapid expansion proved unsustainable in the long run, as diverse cultures clashed and ambitious rulers sought autonomy. Genghis Khan died in 1227 during a campaign against the Tangut Kingdom, Western Shiaf. The circumstances surrounding his death remain shrouded in mystery, with various accounts suggesting illness or injuries sustained during combat. His death did not lead to the empire's collapse. Instead, It triggered a carefully orchestrated succession plan outlined by him, dividing the vast territories among his sons. The legacy of the Mongol Empire remains complex and multifaceted. While remembered for widespread destruction and conquest, their impact on trade, cultural exchange, and political organization was profound. The Pax Mongolica facilitated unprecedented global interconnectedness, leaving an indelible mark on Eurasia's history, a testament to both the destructive power and surprising transformative potential of nomadic empires. The death of Genghis Khan in 1259 plunged the Mongol Empire into a succession crisis. Unlike previous rulers who had clearly designated heirs, Menk left no obvious successor, triggering immediate and fierce competition among his brothers Hulagu, Kublai, and Arik BK. This power vacuum fractured the vast empire, threatening decades of unprecedented expansion and stability. The ensuing civil war would pit brother against brother, Mongol against Mongol, fundamentally reshaping the future trajectory of the largest contiguous land empire in history. Arik BK, Monkey's youngest brother, swiftly declared himself Great Khan from Karakoram, the traditional Mongol capital. He argued his lineage entitled him to the throne, emphasizing adherence to tradition and condemning his brother's campaigns in Persia and China as deviations from Mongol custom. Hulagu, already deeply engaged in conquering the Middle East, disregarded Arik BK's claim, initiating a full-scale military confrontation that stretched across thousands of miles. Kublai Khan, positioned in the strategically vital region of modern-day Mongolia and Siberia, also rejected Arik BK's authority. He commanded a substantial army composed of both Mongol and Chinese soldiers, demonstrating his ambition to not only seize power, but also solidify his control over China's burgeoning wealth and resources. His decision effectively split the Mongol war machine into three distinct factions. Hulagu's campaign in Persia was abruptly halted as he diverted forces back to Anatolia to confront his brother Arik BK's armies. This crucial shift allowed the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, under Baybars, to consolidate its power and launch retaliatory raids into Mongol-held territories in Syria. The internal conflict inadvertently weakened the Ilkhanate's grip on the Middle East, opening a window for renewed resistance. The civil war was not solely a military affair. It involved complex political maneuvering, alliances forged and broken, and the manipulation of Mongol traditions to legitimize claims to the throne. Each claimant sought support from various factions within the empire, from disgruntled generals to local rulers eager to exploit the power vacuum for their own gain. Propaganda played a significant role in shaping public opinion. Despite initial advantages, Arik BK's campaign faltered due to logistical challenges and a lack of widespread support. His attempts to enforce traditional Mongol practices were perceived as restrictive by many who had benefited from the more cosmopolitan policies of his brothers. Moreover, He faced significant economic hardship, as trade routes disrupted by the war severely impacted Karakoram. Kublai Khan's victory was largely attributed to his superior resources and the support he garnered from Chinese officials and administrators. He demonstrated a pragmatic approach, integrating conquered territories more effectively than Ariq Ki, who struggled to reconcile Mongol traditions with the realities of governing a diverse empire. The war highlighted the growing importance of administrative capacity in maintaining control. In 1264, Ariq Ki surrendered to Kublai Khan, effectively ending the civil war. While he was spared execution, his supporters were purged from positions of power, and many faced exile or death. The conflict left a lasting scar on Mongol society, exposing deep-seated divisions and eroding the myth of Mongol invincibility. The empire, though reunited under Kublai, remained fractured along ideological lines. The succession crisis profoundly impacted the Mongol Empire's expansionist ambitions. Hulagu continued his campaigns in Persia and Mesopotamia, but with diminished resources, while Kublai focused on consolidating his rule over China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. The empire's vast reach was now increasingly divided into semi-autonomous regions, each pursuing its own interests. Genghis Khan succeeded his father as Great Khan in 1229. He was known for consolidating Mongol gains and continuing the expansionist policies established by Genghis. During his reign, further campaigns targeted Korea, Persia, and parts of Russia. Genghis also focused on improving infrastructure within the empire, establishing a postal system of the Yam that facilitated communication and troop movement across vast distances. The civil war revealed a critical vulnerability within the Mongol Empire, its reliance on consensus-based leadership. The absence of a clear succession mechanism proved disastrous, demonstrating that even the most formidable military power could be undone by internal strife. While Kublai Khan would forge an enduring dynasty in China, the seeds of fragmentation had been sown, ultimately contributing to the empire's eventual decline. By the mid-13th century, Mongol expansion had reached its zenith. However, maintaining such a vast empire presented unprecedented challenges. The traditional Mongol system of governance, based on personal loyalty to the Khan and tribal structure, began to strain under the sheer scale of conquered territories. Communication was slow, enforcement difficult, and resentment simmered amongst subjugated populations. While initially successful due to its military prowess, the long-term stability of the Mongol Empire remained uncertain, a complex tapestry woven with threads of ambition, innovation, and potential disintegration. One crucial innovation was the implementation of the Ortog, or census registers. These detailed records catalogued populations, livestock, and agricultural output within conquered territories. Initially intended for taxation purposes, a key source of revenue for the empire, the Ortog also provided valuable demographic data. This allowed Mongol administrators to better understand the resources at their disposal and plan accordingly. While seemingly bureaucratic, the auto represented a nascent form of imperial administration, reflecting an attempt to systematize control over diverse populations. The Yam system, an elaborate network of postal stations and relay riders, proved vital for communication across the vast empire. These stations, spaced roughly 20-40 miles apart, provided fresh horses and lodging to messengers traveling with incredible speed, sometimes covering over 700 miles in a single week. The Yam facilitated rapid dissemination of orders, intelligence reports, and official decrees from the Great Khan to distant provinces, effectively shrinking the empire's immense size and enabling quicker responses to potential threats. Religious tolerance, while often touted as a defining characteristic of Mongol rule, was primarily pragmatic. Genghis Khan understood that forcing conversion would breed resentment and rebellion. Instead, he permitted the practice of various religions: Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, within his empire, provided they did not challenge Mongol authority or disrupt public order. This policy attracted merchants and scholars from across Eurasia, contributing to a flourishing exchange of ideas and technologies. However, the empire's vastness also fostered fragmentation. As Mongol princes gained control over increasingly independent territories, their loyalty to the Great Khan gradually eroded. The concept of Kurultai, the assembly of Mongol chieftains, became increasingly ceremonial rather than a genuine mechanism for collective decision-making. Regional interests often outweighed imperial unity, laying the groundwork for future divisions and succession crises. The death of Minki Khan in 1259 triggered the first major succession crisis. Without a clear heir, rival claimants emerged: Kublai, Arikbu, and Bitig, plunging the empire into civil war. This period of internal conflict significantly weakened Mongol control over conquered territories, allowing for rebellions to erupt in regions like Persia and China. The fragile unity that had propelled their conquests began to unravel. Kublai Khan's eventual victory solidified his rule in China, leading to the establishment of the Yuan dynasty. However, his focus on consolidating power within China meant that other regions of the empire were increasingly left to their own devices. His brother Hulagu Khan continued to rule over Persia and Mesopotamia, but the vast territories stretching westward remained largely disconnected from Kublai's authority, accelerating the process of fragmentation. The Ilkhanate in Persia, under Hulagu's descendants, adopted many Persian customs and embraced Islam. This cultural assimilation gradually distanced them from the traditional Mongol identity and contributed to their eventual decline. Internal conflicts amongst the Ilkhanate rulers further weakened their grip on power, making them vulnerable to rising regional powers like the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Golden Horde, ruling over Russia and surrounding territories faced constant challenges from Orthodox Christian principalities seeking independence. While initially imposing a tribute system known as the Khan's tax, Mongol overlordship gradually weakened due to internal divisions and the rise of Moscow as a dominant power within the region. The eventual collapse of the Golden Horde marked a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. The Mongol postal system, or YAM, was revolutionary for its time. Relay stations were established every 20-30 miles, providing fresh horses and riders to ensure swift communication across the empire. This allowed for rapid dissemination of information, military orders, tax collection updates, even royal decrees, effectively shrinking the vast distances of the Mongol territories. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire, once an unparalleled force reshaping Eurasia, was irrevocably fracturing. While its legacy endured in trade routes, cultural exchange, and administrative innovations, the unified empire had dissolved into a collection of independent khanates, each pursuing their own agendas. The seeds of decline, sown by ambition, distance, and divergent interests, ultimately led to the disintegration of this remarkable, yet ephemeral, superpower. By the mid-13th century, Mongol expansion had reached its zenith. While Batu Khan solidified his rule over the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe, Genghis Khan's reign saw continued campaigns southward. The southern Song dynasty of China remained a persistent challenge, proving far more resilient than initial assessments suggested. Mongol armies, though formidable, struggled to adapt to the terrain and defensive strategies employed by the Song. This protracted conflict would consume significant resources and manpower, delaying further westward expansion and revealing limitations within the Mongol military machine. The challenges faced by the Mongols in China weren't solely military. Logistical nightmares plagued supply lines, stretching thousands of miles, and endemic disease, particularly outbreaks of dysentery amongst the troops, hampered campaign effectiveness. The Song possessed a sophisticated network of canals facilitating troop movement and resource distribution, something the Mongols were initially ill-equipped to counter. Furthermore, Song diplomats skillfully exploited internal Mongol rivalries, delaying campaigns and purchasing valuable time for defensive preparations. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, began his own campaigns against the Song after Genghis' death. While initially successful, Kublai's focus increasingly shifted toward consolidating power within the Mongol Empire and establishing a more sedentary administration in conquered territories. This transition marked a divergence from the purely nomadic lifestyle that had defined earlier Mongol conquests, introducing new complexities regarding governance and cultural assimilation. The Ilkhanate, the Mongol successor state ruling Persia and surrounding regions, also faced significant internal challenges. Lai Khan's initial conquests had been devastating, but maintaining control over a diverse, population proved difficult. Religious tensions between Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, and Zoroastrians frequently erupted into conflict. The Ilkhanate's adoption of Christianity under Genghis Khan briefly fostered unity, but this conversion ultimately failed to prevent fragmentation. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt represented a formidable obstacle to Mongol expansion westward. The Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260 marked the first significant Mongol defeat, halting their advance into North Africa and preserving Islamic civilization from complete subjugation. The Mamluks, disciplined infantry and effective cavalry, proved surprisingly resilient against the famed Mongol horse archers, demonstrating the adaptability of defensive strategies. The death of Genghis Khan in 1259 triggered a succession crisis within the Mongol Empire, further fragmenting its vast territories. His three primary contenders, Kublai, Arik-Biu-Kwai, and Bit-Gen, each laid claim to the Khaganate, initiating a period of civil war that significantly weakened the empire's cohesion and diverted resources from external campaigns. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire wasn't solely a result of succession disputes. Vast distances, disparate cultures, and varying economic conditions fostered regional autonomy amongst the Khanates. Each successor state gradually adapted to its local environment, adopting distinct cultural practices and political systems that increasingly diverged from the shared Mongol heritage. Despite their military prowess, the Mongols often struggled to integrate conquered populations effectively. Policies of forced relocation and religious persecution frequently sparked resistance movements, undermining Mongol authority and contributing to instability. The empire's reliance on tribute systems also created resentment amongst subjugated peoples who felt exploited by foreign rule. The Black Death, originating in Asia and spreading along trade routes within the Mongol Empire, devastated populations across Eurasia in the 14th century. The interconnectedness facilitated by Mongol trade networks inadvertently accelerated the pandemic's transmission, contributing to widespread social and economic collapse throughout the empire and beyond. Religious tolerance was a pragmatic policy adopted by Genghis Khan and his successors. While Mongols practiced their own shamanistic beliefs, they generally allowed conquered populations to practice their faiths: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, fostering stability and reducing the likelihood of rebellion. This policy also attracted skilled individuals from diverse religious backgrounds into Mongol service. By the late 14th century, the Mongol Empire had largely dissolved into a collection of smaller successor states, while their legacy in trade, technology transfer, and cultural exchange remains undeniable. Internal divisions, environmental challenges, and external pressures ultimately led to the empire's decline. Where the goal wasn't to look healthy, the story of the Mongols serves as a stark reminder that even the most formidable empires are not immune to the forces of change and decay. The death of Temüjin Khan in 1259 plunged the Mongol Empire into a succession crisis. Unlike his predecessors, Temüjin had not designated an heir, triggering a power struggle between his brothers Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik Ki. This internal conflict fractured the vast empire, initially united under Genghis Khan's vision. The ensuing civil war would test the resilience of Mongol military dominance and fundamentally reshape the future trajectory of their conquests, diverting resources from potentially lucrative campaigns further west and south. Kublai Khan, based in Karakorum, asserted his claim to the Great Khan title. His primary challenge came from Arik Ki, who garnered support from traditionalist Mongol nobles, wary of Kublai's growing Chinese influence and reliance on non-Mongol advisors. Hulagu, already engaged in campaigns against the Middle East, initially supported Kublai, but remained largely preoccupied with his own conquests, leading to a complex web of alliances and betrayals across the sprawling empire. Arik Ki's rebellion proved surprisingly formidable. He skillfully exploited existing resentments within the Mongol aristocracy, rallying support based on preserving traditional Mongol customs and resisting Kublai's perceived assimilation into Chinese culture. This civil war was not solely about succession. It represented a deeper ideological clash between different factions within the empire concerning its identity and future direction. Kublai's forces, though initially hampered by the rebellion, ultimately proved superior in resources and manpower. He drew heavily on his Chinese army, including siege engineers and skilled infantry, a departure from traditional Mongol reliance solely on cavalry. This signaled a gradual shift in Mongol military tactics, integrating foreign expertise to bolster their strength. The conflict wasn't confined to Central Asia. Hulagu, embroiled in his Middle Eastern campaigns, faced pressure from both Kublai and Arik Ki, diverting resources and manpower that could have been used for further conquests. The need to maintain a fragile alliance with the Ilkhanate complicated military strategy considerably. This internal strife significantly slowed down Mongol expansion westward. Arik Ki's defeat in 1264 marked a turning point. While he was captured alive, his rebellion demonstrated the vulnerabilities within the Mongol system and the potential for internal dissent to undermine imperial authority. Kublai's victory consolidated his power, but also revealed the empire's growing fragmentation along regional lines. Kublai Khan, now firmly established as Great Khan, focused on consolidating his rule in China. He adopted the title of Emperor Shizu of Yuan and began the process of establishing a formal dynasty, formally abandoning any pretense of continuing Genghis Khan's universal empire. This marked a decisive shift towards Sinicization and a divergence from Mongol traditions. Hulagu continued his conquests in Persia and Iraq, establishing the Ilkhanate, a semi-independent Mongol state. While acknowledging Kublai's authority initially, the Ilkhanate increasingly pursued its own agenda, was to look healthy, forging alliances with Christian powers against Muslim rivals, a testament to the evolving political landscape shaped by the succession crisis. The Mongol Empire was effectively divided into four major khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia and Iraq, the Golden Horde in Russia, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. While technically still under the nominal authority of a great Khan, these entities operated with increasing autonomy, pursuing their own distinct interests and forging unique identities. Despite the empire's vastness and power, internal divisions and succession struggles constantly threatened its stability. The death of Ugadi Khan in 1241 triggered a period of intense political maneuvering among his sons and other powerful Mongol figures. The interregnum temporarily halted further expansion, but highlighted the inherent challenges of managing such an immense empire across multiple generations. The succession crisis of 1259 to 1264 ultimately signaled the beginning of the end for a unified Mongol Empire. While Mongol power would endure for centuries in its various khanates, the dream of a single, interconnected empire stretching from East Asia to Europe was irrevocably shattered. The fragmentation paved the way for new regional powers and fundamentally altered the course of Eurasian history. By the mid-13th century, Mongol expansion had dramatically reshaped Eurasia. Yet, maintaining such a vast empire proved an unprecedented challenge. The traditional Mongol system of governance, based on personal loyalty to the Khan and tribal structures, began to strain under its own weight. Local administrators, often appointed due to military prowess rather than administrative skill, frequently exploited conquered populations, fueling resentment and sparking localized rebellions across Persia, Russia, and China. The sheer scale demanded new approaches. Recognizing these difficulties, Kublai Khan, ruling over the Yuan dynasty in China, initiated reforms. He embraced Chinese bureaucratic traditions, incorporating Confucian scholars into his administration and establishing a complex system of examinations to select officials. While this strengthened governance within China, it alienated some Mongol nobles who felt their traditional warrior values were being undermined by sedentary bureaucracy. This tension would become a defining characteristic of the Yuan dynasty's later struggles. Elsewhere, the Golden Horde, ruling over Russia and surrounding territories, adopted a more exploitative approach. While initially allowing some degree of autonomy to local rulers, they increasingly imposed heavy tribute demands and asserted direct control. This policy, coupled with Mongol brutality during conquests, left a lasting scar on Russian collective memory, contributing to centuries of anti-Mongol sentiment and shaping the narrative of their subsequent liberation. The Ilkhanate in Persia faced its own unique challenges. Initially, Mongol rulers adopted aspects of Persian culture and employed Persian administrators. However, succession disputes frequently plunged the region into civil war, weakening the empire's grip on power. Religious tensions also flared, with some ilkhans converting to Islam, while others remained Buddhist or pagan, creating social instability and prompting internal conflict. Trade remained vital to the Mongol Empire's prosperity. The Pax Mongolica, the period of relative peace and stability enforced by Mongol rule, facilitated unprecedented levels of commercial exchange across Eurasia, connecting Europe with China for the first time in centuries. Goods like silk, spices, and porcelain flowed westward, while European innovations and technologies traveled eastward, contributing to a burgeoning global economy. However, this interconnectedness also had a dark side. The ease of travel and trade facilitated the spread of disease. In 1347, the bubonic plague, known as the Black Death, arrived in Europe via Mongol trading routes, devastating populations and profoundly altering European society. The pandemic drastically reduced labor forces, contributed to social upheaval, and weakened feudal systems. Succession crises continued to plague the Mongol Empire. The traditional system of electing Khans from among eligible descendants proved increasingly chaotic and divisive. Powerful regional rulers often challenged central authority, leading to fragmentation and internal warfare. The vastness of the empire made effective communication and control nearly impossible, exacerbating these problems. Religious diversity within the empire also presented challenges. While initially tolerant of different faiths, tensions arose as various religious groups competed for influence and resources. The conversion efforts of missionaries from Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism often clashed with local beliefs and traditions, contributing to social unrest and occasionally sparking violence. By the late 14th century, the Mongol Empire had largely dissolved into smaller khanates. The Yuan dynasty in China collapsed in 1368, replaced by the Ming dynasty. The Golden Horde fragmented into various Russian principalities, while the goal wasn't disintegrated amidst internal strife and external invasions. While remnants of Mongol power persisted for centuries, the unified empire was no more. The death of Genghis Khan in 1241 plunged the Mongol Empire into a period of succession crisis. While the Kurultai, the assembly of Mongol chieftains, was convened to elect his successor, rivalries quickly surfaced between Batu Khan, who controlled the Golden Horde and desired more autonomy, and other powerful figures like Kaidu. This disunity significantly slowed expansion westward, allowing Europe to breathe a sigh of relief after the devastating initial raids. The fragile peace also allowed for nascent diplomatic relations with various European powers. Despite its eventual fragmentation, the legacy of the Mongol Empire remains profound. They facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange, spurred economic growth, and redrew the political map of Eurasia. Though their conquests were often brutal, they inadvertently forged new connections between East and West, leaving an indelible mark on world history, a testament to both the power and the fragility of empires. The Ilkhanate's conversion to Christianity under Genghis Khan in 1304 remains one of the most perplexing episodes in Mongol history. While initially embraced enthusiastically, with mosques converted into churches and Islamic scholars exiled, the shift proved short-lived. The vast majority of the population remained Muslim, and the religious policies of subsequent Ilkhanate rulers fluctuated wildly. Ghazan's motivations are debated: a genuine spiritual awakening, a strategic alliance with Christendom against the Mamluks, or perhaps an attempt to unify his fractured realm through a seemingly novel approach. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt posed a constant thorn in the Ilkhanate's side. Repeated Mongol invasions were repelled by the skilled Egyptian cavalry and fortifications. The Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, where Baybars decisively defeated Hulagu's forces, marked a crucial turning point, effectively halting Mongol expansion westwards. This defeat, though not crippling, highlighted the limitations of Mongol military dominance against well-prepared and determined opponents, forcing them to reassess their strategies. The Pax Mongolica extended to trade routes, most notably the Silk Road. European merchants like Marco Polo benefited immensely from this relative peace and security. Goods, spices, silks, porcelain flowed freely between East and West, transforming economies and cultures. However, this prosperity was not universal. Local rulers sometimes exploited the situation for their own gain, contributing to resentment and instability in certain regions under Mongol control. Disease traveled along the same routes as trade and diplomacy. Black Death, originating in Central Asia, spread rapidly westward along Mongol trading networks in the 14th century. Its devastating impact on Europe, wiping out an estimated 30–60% of the population, profoundly altered social structures and economies, indirectly contributing to the decline of feudalism and fostering a climate of uncertainty across the continent. The Golden Horde's relationship with its Russian tributaries was complex, initially demanding tribute and asserting dominance. Mongol rule inadvertently fostered a degree of political centralization in Russia, clearing away competing principalities under the authority of the Khan. The rise of Moscow as a powerful principality can be directly linked to its strategic position as a tax collector for the Golden Horde, allowing it to accumulate wealth and influence. Tamerlanid, though often associated with the Mongol legacy, was not himself a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. He positioned himself as a restorer of Mongol glory and employed Mongol military tactics. But his empire differed significantly from its predecessor. His conquests were characterized by brutal efficiency and widespread destruction, particularly in Persia and Central Asia, leaving a trail of devastation that overshadowed any claims to legitimacy. The Yuan dynasty in China faced constant internal tensions. The Mongols, while initially successful at conquering China, struggled to integrate into Chinese society and adapt to its complex administrative systems. Rebellions flared periodically, fueled by resentment over Mongol policies, economic hardship, and the cultural divide between the ruling elite and the Han Chinese population. The Red Turban Rebellion, 1351–1368, proved to be the final nail in the Yuan dynasty's coffin. Originating as a religious movement protesting Mongol rule, it quickly evolved into a full-scale revolt. Led by figures like Zhu Yuanzhang, who would later found the Ming dynasty, the rebellion capitalized on widespread discontent and ultimately overthrew the Yuan, marking the end of Mongol dominance in China. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire wasn't solely due to internal conflicts or external pressures. The vast distances involved, coupled with differing cultural contexts within each khanate, made centralized control increasingly difficult. Local rulers gradually asserted their autonomy, adopting local customs and languages, ultimately leading to the disintegration of the unified Mongol state into a collection of independent successor states. Genghis Khan's ascension to the throne in 1246 marked an attempt to reassert centralized control. He immediately targeted Batu, perceiving him as rebellious and challenging Mongol authority. Genghis initiated a military campaign against the Golden Horde, intending to force submission and punish perceived insubordination. This conflict further fractured the empire's unity, depleting resources and manpower that could have been directed towards expansion elsewhere. Ultimately, however, Genghis' reign proved short-lived. Despite its eventual decline, the Mongol Empire left an indelible mark on world history. Its impact extended far beyond conquest, facilitating cultural exchange, reshaping trade routes, and influencing political landscapes across Eurasia. The legacy of Genghis Khan and his successors continues to resonate today, a testament to their unprecedented ambition and transformative power. The Ilkhanate's conversion to Mongol tradition wasn't immediate or uniform. Nestorian Christianity, prevalent among many administrators and artisans, faced periods of tolerance alongside persecution under different rulers. Hulagu Khan himself initially showed respect for Christian communities, but subsequent Khans often favored Sunni Islam, viewing it as a unifying force within the diverse empire. This fluctuating religious landscape reflects the complex power dynamics and evolving ambitions within the Ilkhanate's court, contributing to internal tensions that would ultimately weaken its foundations. The Golden Horde's interaction with the Rus principalities was characterized by tribute and dependency. The Hokkien system, essentially a yearly tax paid in furs, slaves, and other goods, became a defining feature of this relationship. While initially devastating, this arrangement eventually fostered a degree of economic integration, albeit heavily skewed in favor of the Mongols. Russian princes, often vying for power amongst themselves, were forced to acknowledge Mongol overlordship, creating a unique political environment that shaped the development of Muscovite Russia. The Yuan dynasty faced constant challenges from rebellions, fueled by resentment over heavy taxation and Mongol cultural dominance. The Red Turban Rebellion, starting in 1276, proved particularly persistent. These uprisings weren't solely about resisting Mongol rule. They often involved complex social and economic grievances among the Han Chinese population, who felt marginalized under Yuan governance. Suppressing these rebellions drained resources and manpower from the empire, weakening its borders and accelerating internal decay. Kublai Khan's attempts at integrating Mongol administrative practices with existing Chinese systems proved partially successful, but also created friction. While the Mongols adopted Confucian ideals to legitimize their rule, they simultaneously maintained a distinct hierarchy, placing Mongols above Han Chinese officials. This dual system, while seemingly pragmatic, fostered resentment and hampered efficient governance. The constant tension between Mongol traditions and Chinese bureaucracy contributed significantly to long-term instability. The Pax Mongolica's impact on trade wasn't solely positive. While facilitating unprecedented movement of goods and people across Eurasia, it also exposed regions to devastating diseases. The Black Death, originating in Central Asia, likely spread along the established Mongol trade routes, decimating populations across Europe and beyond. This unintended consequence fundamentally altered demographic patterns and societal structures throughout the interconnected world. The Mongol military machine wasn't invincible. The Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt successfully repelled several Mongol invasions, demonstrating the limits of Mongol expansion. Their superior weaponry, disciplined armies, and knowledge of the terrain proved crucial in halting the Mongol advance into North Africa. This victory significantly impacted the course of Islamic history and prevented further Mongol incursions into the region. The Mongol Empire's environmental impact was substantial, particularly through deforestation to fuel military campaigns and infrastructure projects. Large-scale timber extraction depleted forests in many conquered regions, leading to soil erosion and impacting local ecosystems. While the scale of this damage wasn't fully understood at the time, it contributed to long-term ecological changes and resource scarcity in several areas within the vast empire. The succession crisis following the death of Genghis Khan in 1259 triggered a period of intense infighting among his brothers and sons. Kublai Khan's eventual victory over his rival, Arik-Bu-G, further fractured the empire into distinct khanates, each pursuing its own interests and gradually drifting apart culturally and politically. This internal division marked a turning point, accelerating the long-term decline of Mongol unity. The legacy of the Mongol Empire extends far beyond its territorial boundaries. The exchange of ideas, technologies, and artistic styles between East and West was significantly amplified during and the Pax Mongolica, profoundly shaping subsequent cultural developments. From gunpowder technology to astronomical knowledge, the Mongols acted as conduits for transformative innovations that impacted civilizations across Eurasia, a testament to their enduring influence. Geek. Sudden death in 1248 during the campaign against Batu sparked another succession crisis. Rumors and accusations of poisoning swirled, contributing to an atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust within the Mongol elite. The abrupt end to his reign left a power vacuum, preventing any decisive action against Batu and deepening the divisions that plagued the empire. This instability demonstrated the inherent fragility of Mongol authority, even at its height. Ultimately, the sheer scale and diversity of the Mongol Empire proved unsustainable. Internal divisions, rebellions, disease, and the assimilation of Mongol rulers into local cultures gradually led to its fragmentation and eventual collapse. While the empire itself vanished, its impact on world history remains undeniable, a period of unprecedented interconnectedness, conquest, and cultural exchange that irrevocably altered the course of civilizations. The death of Mentuan Khan in 1259 plunged the Mongol Empire into a succession crisis. Unlike previous Khans, whose appointments were relatively straightforward, Mink had not designated an heir. This sparked immediate rivalry between his brothers Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik Bq. Each believed they possessed the legitimacy to rule the vast territories, stretching from Korea to Hungary. The ensuing power struggle would fundamentally reshape the empire's structure and ultimately lead to its fragmentation into distinct khanates. Kublai Khan, initially favoured by some within the Kurultai, faced immediate challenges. He consolidated power in the east, focused on consolidating his control over China and establishing a stable administration. His ambition extended beyond mere conquest. He envisioned a dynasty that would integrate Mongol rule with Chinese governance, a radical departure from Genghis Khan's earlier policies. This divergence laid the groundwork for the Yuan dynasty, which would eventually claim legitimacy independent of the Great Khan. Hulagu Khan, in Persia, faced his own set of complexities. His ilkhanate quickly became embroiled in religious tensions between Sunni and Shia Islam. While initially tolerant, Hulagu's conversion to a form of Christianity, Jacobitism, further alienated some Muslim populations. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt proved a persistent obstacle, culminating in the decisive Mongol defeat at Ain Jalut in 1260, a pivotal moment that halted Mongol expansion westward. Arik Bq's claim to the Great Khanate was short-lived. Lacking the resources and strategic acumen of his brothers, he quickly lost control over much of Central Asia. His attempted invasion of Persia proved disastrous, further weakening Mongol authority in the region. While he briefly held sway, Arik Bq's failure underscored the inherent instability created by Memun's death and highlighted the fragmentation that was rapidly consuming the empire. The Golden Horde, under Batu Khan's successors, continued to exert influence over Russia and Eastern Europe. While initially ruthless conquerors, the Mongol rulers gradually adopted many aspects of Rus culture. The system of tribute, known as the Khan's levy, became a defining feature of Russian political and economic life for centuries, shaping its development in profound ways. The Yuan dynasty's relationship with the Song dynasty was complicated by ongoing resistance. While Kublai Khan achieved victory in 1279, pockets of Song loyalists continued to fight for years afterward. The final holdout, the island of Taiwan, wasn't conquered until 1283. This protracted conflict demonstrated the difficulty of completely subjugating a population accustomed to centuries of independent rule and highlighted ongoing challenges, even after initial conquest. The Pax Mongolica, though initially fostering trade and cultural exchange along the Silk Road, began to unravel as the empire fragmented. While travel remained relatively safe for some time, increased political instability led to banditry and disruptions in communication networks. The benefits of unified Mongol rule diminished significantly, impacting the flow of goods and ideas between East and West. The Black Death, originating in Central Asia, spread rapidly across Eurasia during the 14th century. While its exact role in Mongol decline is debated by historians, the pandemic undoubtedly exacerbated existing vulnerabilities within the fractured khanates. The loss of population and economic disruption further weakened already strained political structures. The Mongol Empire's legacy is complex and multifaceted. While their conquests brought immense destruction and suffering, they also facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange and trade. The empire's influence on legal systems, military tactics, and artistic styles resonates even today. Understanding the Mongol period requires acknowledging both the brutality of conquest and the unexpected consequences of its vast reach. Amun Minki Khan emerged victorious from the subsequent Kurultai in 1251. His reign represented an effort to restore order and resume aggressive expansion. He appointed his younger brother, Hulagu, to lead a new campaign westward, targeting the Middle East, while entrusting Batu's cousin Berk with overseeing the Golden Horde. Mun Mink's focus on military campaigns strained resources and created tensions between different branches of the family. By the 14th century, the once unified Mongol Empire had dissolved into separate and often warring khanates. While remnants of Mongol influence persisted for centuries, the era of unparalleled expansion and dominance was over. The story of the Mongols serves as a potent reminder of the cyclical nature of empires, their rise, their fragmentation, and ultimately, their transformation into something new, leaving an indelible mark on global history. Hulagu's campaign into the Middle East proved devastatingly successful. Baghdad fell in 1258 after a brutal siege, marking the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. and sending shockwaves throughout the Islamic world. The destruction of Baghdad and other major cities significantly weakened regional powers and paved the way for further Mongol advances like Persia and Mesopotamia. This conquest also brought immense wealth to the Mongol Empire. The Ilkhanate, established by Hulagu, became a distinct Mongol Khanate, adopting aspects of Persian culture while maintaining Mongol military dominance. This process of assimilation and cultural exchange would continue throughout the empire's existence in different regions. The Ilkhanate's relationship with the Golden Horde remained tense, often punctuated by conflict over territories and resources. Meanwhile, in the Golden Horde, Burke converted to Islam, creating significant friction with Batu and other traditionalist Mongols. This religious conversion wasn't purely spiritual. It was a strategic move designed to gain support from Muslim populations within the region and potentially forge alliances against rival Mongol factions. It also marked an early divergence between the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde. Munmik's death in 1259 triggered another devastating Kurultai and renewed conflict among his sons, Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik B. Ki. The ensuing civil war fractured the empire into three competing factions, severely hindering its ability to project power effectively. This internal strife would ultimately lead to a permanent division of the Mongol Empire. Kublai Khan eventually emerged victorious, though his control was largely limited to East Asia and China. He established the Yuan dynasty in 1271, marking a significant shift away from nomadic traditions towards more sedentary rule. Kublai's decision to focus on consolidating power in China meant neglecting other areas of the Mongol Empire, accelerating its fragmentation. The Mongol Empire, once a unified force stretching from Eastern Europe to East Asia, had irrevocably fractured into distinct Khanates: the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Yuan dynasty. While each Khanate continued to exert influence in their respective regions for centuries, the dream of a single, sprawling Mongol dominion was over. The legacy, however, remained a period of unprecedented interconnectedness and exchange across Eurasia. The death of Ugidi Khan in 1241 created a power vacuum within the Mongol Empire. His designated successor, Guyuk, faced immediate challenges from competing factions, vying for control. This period of interregnum revealed the inherent fragility of even the most formidable empires. The Kurultai, the traditional assembly of Mongol chieftains, was convened to elect a new great Khan, but the process quickly devolved into political maneuvering and outright conflict among Ugidi's sons and their allies. Guyuk's reign was short and turbulent. He attempted to reverse some of Ugidi's policies, particularly regarding the expansion into Europe, which had stalled due to logistical difficulties, and the devastating winter of 1242. His actions alienated many powerful figures within the empire, leading to widespread discontent and ultimately a conspiracy against him. The instability highlighted a critical flaw. While military prowess built the empire, succession disputes threatened its very foundation. In 1246, Göyük was overthrown and executed by his rivals, led primarily by Batu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, who controlled the Golden Horde. This event demonstrated the growing autonomy of the individual khanates that were beginning to form within the vast Mongol territories. The power struggles weren't solely about personal ambition. They reflected differing visions for the empire's future. Continued expansion versus consolidation and regional rule. Menk Khan emerged victorious from the subsequent Kurultai in 1251. His election marked a return to centralized authority, though his rule would be constantly challenged by his brothers, Kublai and Hulagu. Menk prioritized restoring order and resuming Mongol expansion, focusing on campaigns against the Song dynasty in China and further conquests in Persia and Mesopotamia. Hulagu Khan's campaign into Persia and Mesopotamia proved incredibly successful. The Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad, a powerful Islamic entity for centuries, was utterly destroyed in 1258 after a brutal siege. This act sent shockwaves throughout the Muslim world and significantly weakened their ability to resist Mongol advances further west. Hulagu established the Ilkhanate, a Mongol dynasty ruling over Persia and surrounding regions. Kublai Khan, meanwhile, focused on consolidating Mongol control over northern China and laying the groundwork for a new dynasty. He adopted many Chinese customs and administrative practices to better govern his conquered territories. This marked a significant divergence from traditional Mongol ways of life, hinting at the cultural assimilation that would increasingly define the Yuan dynasty's future. The death of Menk Khan in 1259 triggered another devastating succession crisis. With no clear heir, both Hulagu and Kublai claimed the title of Great Khan, plunging the empire into civil war. This conflict effectively divided the Mongol Empire into distinct entities, each pursuing its own agendas and diminishing the overall strength of the once unified realm. Kublai Khan eventually prevailed in the civil war, but his victory didn't reunite the empire. He focused on ruling his domain, which became known as the Yuan dynasty, while Hulagu's descendants continued to rule Persia and Mesopotamia. The vast Mongol territory was now irrevocably fragmented, marking a significant turning point in its history. The Mongol postal system, the Yam, continued to function remarkably well, even during periods of internal conflict. This intricate network of relay stations and riders facilitated communication and trade across vast distances, ensuring that goods flowed relatively freely throughout the fragmented empire. Its efficiency was a testament to Genghis Khan's initial organizational genius. Despite its eventual fragmentation, the Mongol Empire's legacy remains profound. It facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange between East and West, spurred technological innovation, and reshaped the political landscape of Eurasia for centuries to come. The empire's impact on trade routes like the Silk Road was transformative, laying the groundwork for globalization in ways previously unimaginable. The Khwarezmian dynasty, ruling over Persia and Central Asia, proved a far more formidable opponent than the Tanguts. Muhammad Su'im, their Shah, initially attempted diplomacy with Genghis Khan, but swiftly escalated to open hostility after a rash act of disrespect towards Mongol envoys. This sparked a brutal and devastating campaign. The Mongols deployed siege weaponry on an unprecedented scale, systematically dismantling Khwarezmian cities like Bukhara and Samarkand. The scorched earth policy aimed not just at conquest, but at demonstrating the consequences of defiance. Jochi, Genghis Khan's eldest son, led the westernmost wing of the Mongol army. His campaigns across Central Asia were relentless, pushing further into Persia and laying waste to countless settlements. Jochi's death in 1220 during a campaign against the Kipchak Turks was a significant blow, though his legacy would be continued by his descendants, who would later establish the Golden Horde. The swiftness and brutality of the Mongol advance left few prepared for the scale of destruction. The Khwarezmian army, despite its size, struggled against the Mongol tactics. Their reliance on heavy cavalry proved ineffective against the highly mobile and coordinated Mongol horse archers. Furthermore, internal divisions and a lack of unified command hampered their ability to mount a cohesive defense. Muhammad, his own flight from his capital further, demoralized his forces and facilitated the Mongol advance, allowing them to conquer virtually all Khwarezmian territory. Following the conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan temporarily paused his westward expansion. He returned to Mongolia in 1221 to deal with internal matters and consolidate his power. This period allowed for the devastated regions to briefly recover, though the memory of Mongol brutality remained deeply ingrained. The pause also provided a critical opportunity for European powers to assess the threat posed by this new, formidable force. The systematic destruction of cities was not solely driven by military necessity. It served as a powerful tool for psychological warfare. The Mongols aimed to inspire terror in potential opponents, discouraging resistance. Through the sheer devastation, they wrought upon those who dared defy them. This calculated use of brutality ensured swift and relatively bloodless conquests in many areas. The impact on trade routes was profound. While initially disruptive, Mongol rule ultimately fostered greater stability along the Silk Road. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, allowed for safer passage of merchants and goods across vast distances, revitalizing commerce between East and West. However, this prosperity was built upon a foundation of conquest and subjugation. The Mongols demonstrated an astonishing capacity for adaptation and innovation in warfare. They readily adopted siege technology from conquered peoples, integrating it into their existing military doctrines. Their use of combined arms infantry, cavalry, and siege weaponry proved devastatingly effective against more traditional armies. The Mongol army was a constantly evolving machine of destruction. The religious policies of Genghis Khan were remarkably tolerant. He generally allowed conquered peoples to practice their own religions freely, understanding that forcing conversion would only breed resentment and rebellion. This pragmatic approach helped maintain stability within the vast empire, although it did not preclude instances of persecution based on political or strategic considerations. The scale of the Mongol conquests led to significant demographic shifts across Eurasia. Populations were displaced, cities were depopulated, and trade routes were disrupted. The long-term consequences included the spread of diseases, notably the Black Death, along these newly connected networks, highlighting the interconnectedness of the world, even in the 13th century. While Genghis Khan died in 1227, his legacy continued through his successors, who expanded the empire even further. The foundations he laid, a unified legal code, the Yusuf, a meritocratic military structure, and an unprecedented level of cross-cultural exchange, would shape Eurasia for centuries to come. The Mongol Empire's impact reverberates even today. The death of Genghis Khan in 1241 created a succession crisis. Unlike his predecessors, Genghis had not clearly designated an heir, plunging the Mongol Empire into a period of intense political maneuvering. The Kurultai, the traditional assembly of Mongol chieftains, was convened to elect a new great Khan, but the process proved deeply divisive. Tensions between Genghis' widow, Temüjin Khatun, who sought to install her son Göyük as Khan, and other powerful families, like Batu Khan, who favored Kaidan, threatened to unravel the fragile unity of the empire. Göyük's ascension to the throne was met with immediate resistance. Kaidan, supported by Batu Khan and several other influential figures, refused to acknowledge his legitimacy. This sparked a protracted civil war, known as the Toluid Civil War, dividing the Mongol Empire into competing factions. The conflict primarily centered on control of Genghis' patrimony, the vast territories in Central Asia, but also reflected deeper ideological divisions concerning the future direction of the empire. A world where the goal wasn't to look healthy. Batu Khan's reluctance to participate fully in Göyük's Kurultai and his subsequent support for Kaidan demonstrated the growing autonomy of the Golden Horde. The westernmost Khanate, established by Batu after the Mongol invasion of Europe, was becoming increasingly independent from the central authority in Mongolia. This divergence foreshadowed a gradual fragmentation of the empire along regional lines, weakening its overall power. The Toluid Civil War significantly impacted Mongol expansion. Campaigns against the Song dynasty in China were halted, and planned expeditions into Western Europe were postponed indefinitely. Göyük's reign was largely consumed by internal conflict, diverting resources and manpower from further conquests. The pause allowed targeted enemies to regroup and fortify their defenses, ultimately slowing the pace of Mongol territorial growth. In 1246, Genghis Khan died unexpectedly, further destabilizing the empire. His death ended the Toluid civil war, but left a power vacuum that was quickly filled by Mongol Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, and a strong proponent of centralized authority. Mongol's election marked a return to more assertive leadership and a renewed focus on imperial unity. Mongol's reign, 1251–1259, was characterized by aggressive expansion and administrative reforms. He dispatched his brother Hulagu Khan to complete the conquest of the Middle East, initiating a devastating campaign against the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Simultaneously, he personally led an expedition against the Tangut Kingdom of Western Shia, decisively crushing its resistance. The destruction of Baghdad in 1258 under Hulagu's command was a pivotal moment. It effectively ended the Abbasid Caliphate and signaled the irreversible decline of Islamic power in Mesopotamia and Persia. The brutality of the Mongol conquest sent shockwaves throughout the Muslim world, solidifying their reputation as ruthless conquerors. Monk implemented significant administrative changes, attempting to standardize Mongol law and improve communication across the vast empire. He emphasized trade and encouraged cultural exchange, establishing a network of postal stations, the Yam, that facilitated rapid transmission of messages throughout the territories under Mongol control. Despite Mongol's efforts to unify the empire, tensions remained, especially between him and his brother, Kubilai, who controlled the Mongol presence in China. Kubilai's increasing assimilation into Chinese culture and his adoption of penetrative practices were perceived as a challenge to traditional Mongol values and created resentment within the ruling elite. Mongol's sudden death in 1259 triggered another succession crisis, this time between Kubilai and his brother Arghun. This event proved to be the final catalyst for the Mongol Empire's fragmentation. The ensuing power struggle would irrevocably divide the empire into independent khanates, marking a significant turning point in its history and setting the stage for its eventual decline. The death of Genghis Khan in 1241 plunged the Mongol Empire into a period of interregnum. While his designated successor, Guyuk, assumed nominal leadership, he faced fierce opposition from Batu Khan, who controlled the Golden Horde and desired greater autonomy. This power struggle paralyzed Mongol expansion for several crucial years. Wasn't to look healthy, diverting resources and creating internal tensions that would ripple across the vast territories they held. The empire's unity, always fragile beneath its apparent strength, was severely tested. Guyuk's reign was short-lived, ending in 1246 after a coup orchestrated by Batu. This further weakened the central authority and emboldened regional khans to assert their independence. The ensuing Kurultai convened to elect a new Great Khan, became a protracted affair filled with political maneuvering and bitter rivalries. Representatives from disparate Mongol clans, eager to advance their own interests, fiercely contested each potential candidate's suitability. The election finally settled on Genghis Khan in 1251. He was a skilled administrator and possessed considerable charisma. But his ascent to power did not quell the internal divisions. His brother, Kublai, supported him initially, but harbored ambitions of his own, particularly for control over the wealthier southern Song dynasty. This simmering rivalry would eventually fracture the empire into competing khanates. Mink focused initially on consolidating his control over existing territories. He dispatched expeditions to subdue regions previously untouched by Mongol conquest, including parts of Persia and Russia. These campaigns, while often successful, stretched the empire's resources thin and further strained the loyalty of subjugated populations. The constant warfare created a climate of resentment that would be exploited in later rebellions. Kublai Khan's focus remained fixed on China, while Mink engaged in campaigns to the west. Kublai relentlessly prepared for a full-scale invasion of the Song dynasty. He understood that conquering this wealthy and sophisticated kingdom would provide immense resources and prestige, transforming the Mongol Empire into an even more formidable power. His ambition was both a strategic calculation and a reflection of his personal drive. In 1259, Genghis Khan died unexpectedly during a campaign against the Jalal ad-Din Banu in Persia. The circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery, fueling speculation about foul play and contributing to another round of succession disputes. The sudden loss plunged the empire into chaos once more, triggering immediate power struggles between Kublai and his brother Hulagu. Hulagu, commander of the Ilkhanate in Persia, seized control in the west, while Kublai asserted his authority in the east. This de facto division marked a critical turning point in Mongol history, effectively splitting the once unified empire into two major branches with diverging interests and priorities. The vast distances separating them further exacerbated the challenges of maintaining cohesion. Kublai, now Great Khan, officially established the Yuan dynasty in 1271, marking a significant shift towards Chinese governance and culture. He adopted many aspects of Chinese administration and attempted to integrate Mongol rule with existing systems. While intended to solidify his position, this assimilation also alienated some traditionalist Mongols who viewed it as a betrayal of their heritage. Hulagu's Ilkhanate faced its own challenges, including resistance from local populations and conflicts with neighboring powers like the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Mongol conquest had not brought lasting peace to Persia. Instead, it ushered in an era of instability and intermittent warfare. Religious tensions also flared as Hulagu attempted to impose Buddhist practices on a predominantly Muslim population. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire, once an unparalleled force for conquest, had begun its irreversible decline. The internal divisions, coupled with external pressures and the sheer logistical challenges of governing such a vast territory, proved insurmountable. While remnants of the empire would persist for centuries, the golden age of Mongol dominance was definitively over, leaving behind a legacy of both immense destruction and profound cultural exchange. The death of Genghis Khan in 1241 threw the Mongol Empire into a period of interregnum. While succession was theoretically meritocratic, it quickly devolved into a power struggle between Genghis' widow, Temüjin Khaltun, and his sons, particularly Genghis Khan and Batu Khan. Temüjin attempted to manipulate the Kurultai, the Mongol assembly, for electing a new great Khan, favoring her son Genghis Khan. This created deep divisions amongst the clans and effectively paralyzed decision making across the vast empire. Batu Khan, leading the Golden Horde's forces that had just conquered Eastern Europe, refused to acknowledge Genghis Khan's claim. This defiance demonstrated the growing autonomy of the Mongol successor states, or khanates. The vast distances and challenging terrain made centralized control increasingly difficult. Each khanate developed its own distinct identity and priorities, often diverging significantly from the policies established by Genghis Khan himself. The Kurultai eventually elected Mano Minki Khan in 1251, after years of political maneuvering. However, his ascension wasn't universally accepted. His brothers, Hulagu and Kublai, both controlled significant territories with their own ambitions. Mink attempted to reassert central authority, but faced constant challenges from these powerful regional rulers who increasingly acted independently. Hulagu Khan continued his westward expansion, devastating the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad in 1258. This event sent shockwaves throughout the Islamic world and marked a pivotal moment in Mongol conquests. The destruction of Baghdad symbolized the decline of the once mighty Abbasid dynasty and facilitated Mongol dominance over Mesopotamia and Persia. Kublai Khan, meanwhile, focused his attention eastward, consolidating Mongol control over northern China and laying the groundwork for the Yuan dynasty. Unlike his brother Hulagu's destructive campaigns, Kublai adopted a more conciliatory approach towards Chinese culture, incorporating Confucian principles into his governance. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, facilitated unprecedented levels of trade and cultural exchange between East and West. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, connecting disparate civilizations and enabling the transfer of goods, ideas, and technologies across Eurasia. However, this era of prosperity wasn't without its dark side. The Black Death, originating in Central Asia, spread rapidly along the Silk Road, devastating populations across Europe and beyond. Ironically, the very trade routes that fostered cultural exchange also facilitated the transmission of a deadly pandemic. The death of Men Minki Khan in 1259 triggered another succession crisis, further weakening the central authority of the Mongol Empire. Kublai and Hulagu each claimed the title of Great Khan, plunging the empire into renewed civil war. This fragmentation ultimately led to the permanent division of the once unified Mongol dominion. The Ilkhanate, ruled by Hulagu's descendants, converted to Islam, gradually adopting Persian culture and distancing themselves from the Mongol traditions of the Golden Horde and Yuan Dynasty. This religious shift had profound implications for the political landscape of Persia and surrounding regions, influencing artistic expression and legal systems. By the late 13th and early 14th centuries, the Mongol Empire had fractured into distinct khanates, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Yuan Dynasty. While each retained a degree of Mongol heritage, their paths diverged significantly, marking the beginning of the end for the unified Mongol dominion that Genghis Khan had forged. The death of Ugidi Khan in 1241 plunged the Mongol Empire into a succession crisis. While his designated successor, Goyuk, initially secured power, his claim was deeply contested by Batu Khan, ruler of the Golden Horde, and others who favoured Kaidu, Gidai's brother. This period saw a significant weakening of central authority. The Great Khan's death triggered internal maneuvering and regional autonomy for various Mongol principalities, delaying further westward expansion that had previously seemed inevitable. The momentum built by Subutai and Batu faltered. Goyuk's reign, 1241–1246, was characterized by brutality and purges aimed at eliminating rivals. He alienated many within the Mongol elite, particularly those who had served under Jidai. His policies were perceived as overly harsh and self-serving, furthering resentment and undermining his legitimacy. Though he attempted to resume campaigns in Europe, the lack of unified support rendered these efforts largely ineffective. The empire was fracturing along personal loyalties rather than strategic objectives. The election of Menmenk Khan in 1251 proved to be a pivotal moment. Following a protracted power struggle between Goyuk's widow, Temüjin Khan, and Batu Khan's representatives, Menmenk emerged as the Great Khan. His ascension helped restore some semblance of unity, though tensions remained. Wasn't to look healthy. He immediately set about reasserting central control and curbing the autonomy enjoyed by regional rulers like those in the Golden Horde. Menmenk's focus shifted eastward, sending his brother Hulagu to complete the conquest of the Middle East. Hulagu's campaign in Persia, 1256–126, was remarkably swift and devastating. The Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad, a symbol of Islamic power for centuries, fell to Mongol forces in 1258 after a brutal siege. The destruction of Baghdad sent shockwaves across the Muslim world and significantly weakened resistance against further Mongol incursions. Hulagu's conquests extended into Syria, posing a new threat to Crusader territories. The Ilkhanate, established by Hulagu in Persia, would become a distinct Mongol Khanate with a unique cultural identity. While initially adhering to traditional Mongol customs, the Ilkhans gradually converted to Islam, leading to significant shifts in religious and social dynamics within their domain. Their relationship with the Golden Horde remained complex, marked by both cooperation and rivalry. The blending of Persian and Mongol cultures created a distinctive artistic and intellectual environment. Mun Mink's sudden death in 1259 triggered another succession crisis. His brothers, Kublai and Arik Biuki, both laid claim to the title of Great Khan. This internal conflict severely weakened the empire's ability to maintain control over its vast territories. The ensuing civil war effectively divided the Mongol Empire into three distinct khanates: the Yuan in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe. Kublai Khan, establishing himself in China, faced considerable challenges integrating conquered populations. The Song dynasty's remnants posed a persistent threat, requiring prolonged military campaigns before their final subjugation. Kublai adopted many Chinese administrative practices and embraced Buddhism, attempting to legitimize his rule among the Han Chinese population. His ambitions extended beyond mainland China, with maritime expeditions into Southeast Asia. The Yuan dynasty's early years were marked by rebellions and resistance from Chinese loyalists. The process of consolidating power was slow and arduous, requiring constant vigilance and military suppression. Despite these challenges, Kublai initiated significant infrastructure projects, including the restoration of the Grand Canal, facilitating trade and communication across his vast empire. His reign laid the foundation for a period of relative stability in China. The Golden Horde, under various Khans, gradually adopted Turkic languages and customs, distancing themselves from their Mongol heritage. Internal divisions and succession disputes weakened its power over time. The rise of Moscow. The rise of Moscow as a dominant principality within the Horde's sphere of influence marked a significant shift in the political landscape of Eastern Europe, ultimately leading to the Horde's decline and fragmentation. The legacy of the Mongol Empire is complex and multifaceted. While responsible for widespread destruction and loss of life, they also facilitated unprecedented trade and cultural exchange across Eurasia, a period often referred to as the Pax Mongolica. Their impact on political boundaries, military tactics, and cultural diffusion resonated for centuries, shaping the course of world history in profound ways despite its eventual fragmentation. The Ilkhanites' embrace of Nestorian Christianity presented a unique cultural dynamic. While Genghis Khan had initially shown tolerance, subsequent rulers exhibited varying degrees of acceptance. Abaka Khan, the first Ilkhan, actively patronized Nestorian communities, viewing them as valuable allies in consolidating his rule against rival Mongol factions. The resurgent Seljuk Turks. This patronage included restoring churches, commissioning religious works, and incorporating Nestorian officials into his administration. However, This period of relative security proved fragile, influenced by shifting political landscapes and internal tensions within both the Ilkhanate and the Nestorian Church itself. The Yuan dynasty's approach to Buddhism was similarly complex. Kublai Khan, influenced by his Uyghur advisors and his own spiritual inclinations, initially encouraged Buddhist monasteries and scholars. Tibetan Buddhism, particularly the Sakya school, enjoyed significant influence at court, with lamas holding high-ranking positions. However, this support wasn't unwavering. Later Yuan emperors occasionally persecuted Buddhist monks and destroyed temples, viewing them as a drain on resources or fearing their growing political power. The relationship between Mongol rulers and Buddhism remained a fluctuating balance of patronage and repression. The Mongol postal system, known as the Yam, was more than just a delivery service. It was a vital artery of the empire. A network of relay stations, spaced roughly to 20-30 miles apart, ensured swift communication and troop movement across vast distances. Fresh horses were always available at these stations, allowing riders to cover immense ground with incredible speed. The Yam facilitated trade, tax collection, and the dissemination of imperial decrees, effectively binding together disparate regions under Mongol control. Its efficiency was a cornerstone of their remarkable logistical capabilities. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, fostered an unprecedented era of cross-cultural exchange. The relative stability and safety provided by Mongol rule facilitated trade along the Silk Road, connecting East Asia with Europe. Goods like silk, spices, porcelain, and gunpowder flowed westward, while European innovations and ideas traveled eastward. This exchange wasn't limited to material goods. It also included religious beliefs, artistic styles, and technological advancements, fundamentally reshaping societies across Eurasia. The Black Death's transmission along the Mongol trade routes remains a subject of ongoing historical debate. While definitive proof is elusive, circumstantial evidence strongly suggests that the plague originated in Central Asia and spread westward via the Silk Road, facilitated by the increased movement of people and goods during the Pax Mongolica. The Mongol Empire's interconnectedness, while beneficial for trade, inadvertently created pathways for devastating disease to traverse continents. The Mongol legal code, the Yasa, was initially an oral tradition, embodying Genghis Khan's principles of governance and military organization. Later attempts were made to codify it into written form, though these versions are fragmented and often contradictory. The Yasa emphasized loyalty, obedience, and harsh punishments for transgressions. It also included provisions regarding trade, taxation, and the treatment of conquered peoples, reflecting the empire's pragmatic approach to ruling a vast and diverse territory. The decline of the Mongol Empire wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual process driven by internal divisions and external pressures. Succession disputes often led to civil wars, weakening centralized authority. The fragmentation into separate khanates, Golden Horde, Ilkhanate, Chagatai Khanate, and Yuan dynasty reflected these diverging interests and ambitions. Simultaneously, rising powers like the Mamluks in Egypt and the Ming dynasty in China challenged Mongol dominance. The Golden Horde's conversion to Islam had profound consequences for its relationship with the other Mongol successor states. It shifted alliances, influenced cultural practices, and ultimately contributed to a growing divergence from the traditional Mongol identity. The adoption of Islam also brought the Golden Horde into contact with the Ottoman Empire and other Islamic powers, further shaping its political trajectory and marking a significant departure from the empire's earlier pagan roots. The Yuan dynasty's eventual overthrow by the Ming dynasty in 1368 marked the end of Mongol rule in China. The rebellion, fueled by resentment towards Mongol policies and economic hardship, was led by Zhu Yuanzhang, who established the Hongwu Emperor as his regnal name. While pockets of resistance remained, the Ming dynasty's victory signaled a definitive shift in power, ending centuries of Mongol dominance over China's heartland.